The soft blue glow of the quantum displacement drive filled the engine room of the Stargazer. Dr. Amy Green checked the readings on her tablet for the 10th time in the past hour. After 15 years of research and countless failed attempts, they were finally ready to test the full power of humanity's newest invention. Drive stability at 98%. She called out to Captain Peter Martinez, who stood watching from the observation deck above. All systems are functioning within expected parameters. The captain nodded, his experienced eyes scanning the various displays around him. Very well, Doctor. Let's make history. He pressed the ship-wide communication button. All hands, this is the captain. Secure all stations for quantum displacement test. This is not a drill. The Stargazer was humanity's most advanced research vessel, built specifically to test the revolutionary quantum displacement drive. Unlike traditional engines that pushed ships through space, this new technology allowed vessels to partially phase out of normal spacetime, letting them bypass the traditional laws of physics. Amy walked to the main control station, her heart beating faster with each step. Her team had run thousands of simulations, but this was different. This was real. Initiating power-up sequence, she announced, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. The engine's hum grew louder, and the blue glow intensified. On the main screen, numbers began climbing rapidly. 20%, 35%, 50%. The ship vibrated slightly as the quantum field began to form around it. 75% power, Amy reported. Field stability holding steady. She couldn't help but smile. Everything was working perfectly. That's when the first alarm went off. Red lights began flashing throughout the engine room. Amy's eyes widened as she saw new readings appearing on her screen. Captain, we're detecting some kind of external interference. Source. Martins demanded, already moving toward the emergency protocol station. Unknown, sir. It's like nothing we've ever seen in our tests. Amy's fingers flew over the controls, trying to make sense of the data streaming in. The quantum field is interacting with something, some kind of established space-time foundation we didn't detect before. The ship shuddered more violently now. Through the viewport, the stars began to blur and shift in impossible ways. The normal black of space took on a purple tinge, then shifted to colors human eyes had never seen before. Should we abort? Martins asked, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. Amy shook her head. The field is already too strong. Shutting down now could tear the ship apart. We need to let it complete the cycle. As if responding to her words, the Stargazer gave one final shudder. The strange colors outside intensified, and then, with a flash that temporarily blinded everyone on board, they were somewhere else. The stars had changed position. Where there had been empty space before, now they could see planets. And ships. Dozens of ships, all of alien design. My God, Martins whispered. Then, louder, battle stations, all hands to emergency positions. But the alien ships weren't attacking. Instead, they seemed to be backing away from the Stargazer, as if they were afraid of it. Amy's instruments were going crazy. Captain, you need to see this. The space around us, it's structured, organized, like someone built a framework into reality itself. Before Martinez could respond, a new light appeared on the communication panel. The aliens were hailing them. The message that came through was in perfect English, obviously translated by advanced technology. Human vessel, you have entered restricted Galactic Council space through unauthorized means. Your ship is utilizing extremely dangerous and prohibited technology. Power down immediately and prepare to be boarded. Martinez looked at Amy, who was still studying her readings with fascination. Doctor, what exactly did we stumble into? Captain, I think. She paused, double-checking her data. I think we just discovered that someone built a highway system into space-time itself, and our drive just accidentally merged onto it without paying the toll. The alien message repeated, more insistent this time. Martinez straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves to our new neighbors." The next few hours were tense. The Stargazer was escorted to a massive space station that seemed to shimmer in and out of reality itself. Amy's instruments revealed that it existed partially in multiple dimensions, making her quantum displacement drive look like a child's toy in comparison. Yet despite their advanced technology, the alien council species seemed deeply troubled by the Stargazer's arrival. As Amy and Martinez were led to a meeting chamber by tall, silvery beings who introduced themselves as the station's security force, they could hear urgent discussions taking place in various alien languages. The chamber they were brought to was circular, with seats rising in tiers around them. Representatives of at least 20 different species filled these seats, all staring down at the two humans with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright fear. A being that appeared to be made of crystalline structures floated forward. "I am High Researcher Vexterra," it announced through the translation field. "Please explain how your species has achieved quantum displacement without proper containment protocols or reality anchors." Amy stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her nervousness. "Our drive creates a localized field that partially phases our ship out of normal spacetime," she explained. "We've been developing the technology for peaceful exploration." "Peaceful?" interrupted a harsh voice. A large reptilian creature stood up, its scales shifting colors with its apparent agitation. "Your ship just breached 6 levels of reality barriers that have stood for 10,000 years. You arrived here by forcing your way through the quantum framework that maintains the stability of civilized space." "Ambassador Krizak," Vexterra said soothingly. They clearly did not know. "Exactly," the reptilian creature, apparently named Krizak, roared. "They achieved this technology without understanding its implications, without the wisdom to use it safely. They must be stopped before they tear reality itself apart." Martinez stepped forward to stand beside Amy. "With all due respect," he said firmly, "we've conducted extensive safety testing of our drive. While we didn't expect to encounter your framework, our technology is perfectly stable." "Stable?" Krizak laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "You don't even have reality anchors. Your ship is like a quantum bomb waiting to explode." Amy noticed something interesting then. While Krizak was expressing outrage, she could see Vexterra and several other council members studying her with intense curiosity. They weren't afraid of the technology itself, she realized. They were afraid because humans had developed it in an entirely different way than they had. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "this is an opportunity. We could share our research, learn from each other." "Enough," Krizak declared. "I move that we immediately impound this vessel and ban humans from further quantum research until they can be properly educated." The chamber erupted in argument. Through it all, Amy couldn't help but notice that her tablet was still receiving data. The Council's quantum framework was fascinating, but it was also rigid, structured in ways that suggested it had been built according to very specific rules and assumptions. Human technology, developed in isolation, had approached the problem from a completely different angle, and based on the worried looks some council members were exchanging, that might be exactly what frightened them the most. As the debate raged on, Martinez leaned close to Amy and whispered, "Doctor, if things go bad, can the drive get us out of here?" Amy nodded slightly, her eyes still on her readings. "Yes, Captain. And now that I understand what we're dealing with, I think we could do a lot more than that." The future of human-council relations hung in the balance, but one thing was already clear. Humanity's accidental breakthrough had changed the galaxy forever, and nothing would ever be the same. Andrew Carter had faced many challenging situations in his diplomatic career, but nothing quite like this. He stood in the grand meeting hall of the council station, watching Dr. Amy Green prepare her presentation. It had been 3 days since the Stargazer's unexpected arrival, and the council had demanded a full explanation of human quantum technology. "Remember," he whispered to Amy, Keep it simple but not too simple. We need to show competence without appearing threatening. Amy nodded, adjusting the holographic projector they'd brought from the ship. The device looked primitive compared to the Council's technology, but it would serve its purpose. Around them, the tiered seats began filling with representatives from various species, their movements creating a symphony of rustling, clicking, and humming sounds. Lieutenant Susan Morris, who had arrived with Carter on an emergency diplomatic shuttle, stood near the entrance. Her official role was security liaison, but her real job was to observe and gather intelligence. Something about the Council's reaction to human technology didn't add up. High Researcher Vexterra floated to the center of the chamber, its crystalline form catching the light. The Council recognizes Earth's representatives. You may begin your presentation. Amy stepped forward, activating the projector. A simplified model of the quantum displacement drive appeared in the air. Thank you, High Researcher. The basic principle of our drive is... Point of order. The harsh voice of Ambassador Krizak cut through the chamber. Before this continues, I demand to know why the humans are being allowed to maintain an active quantum device in Council space. Carter stepped forward smoothly. Ambassador, as we explained, our ship's drive cannot be fully powered down without risk. The maintenance field is necessary for stability. Convenient, Krizak hissed. Just as it's convenient that your ship remains ready to flee at any moment. From her position near the door, Susan noticed something interesting. While Krizak was speaking, several other council members were passing data crystals among themselves, trying to be discreet. She adjusted her modified contact lens, capturing images for later analysis. Amy continued her presentation, explaining how the drive created a bubble of altered spacetime around the ship. The technical details were simplified, but Susan could see that Vexterra and several other scientists were becoming increasingly agitated. Finally, a new voice spoke up. A beam that looked like a floating cloud of golden particles moved forward. This is impossible, it stated. Your approach violates the fundamental laws of quantum manipulation as established by the founders. Not impossible, Amy replied carefully. Just different. We developed our understanding of quantum mechanics independently, without the constraints of existing assumptions. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Susan noticed that the council members exchanging data crystals were now speaking urgently into personal communication devices. Carter saw his opening. Perhaps this demonstrates the value of fresh perspectives. Human technology might offer new insights that could benefit everyone. Benefit. Krizak stood, his scales flashing warning colors. Your crude methods could unravel the quantum framework that holds civilized space together. The framework that the founders spent millennia perfecting. Susan's attention was caught by that last statement. The founders. Every time they were mentioned, certain council members showed signs of stress. She began correlating the reactions, building a pattern in her mind. Meanwhile, Amy had brought up a new diagram. Our tests show the drive is completely stable. Yes, we approached quantum mechanics differently than the founders. But enough. Krizak's tail lashed in agitation. I move that we end this farce. The humans clearly cannot be trusted with this technology. I propose immediate containment measures. Vexterra's crystalline form pulsed with soft light. The Council does not act hastily, Ambassador. We must study. Study. Krizak interrupted. While they perfect their reality warping drive, while they possibly develop even more dangerous technologies, the human ship crashed through quantum barriers that were supposed to be impenetrable. Susan had heard enough. She quietly activated her comm link to the Stargazer. Captain Martinez, be advised. Detecting increased power signatures from several council ships. They're trying to be subtle about it, but they're moving into position around the station. Carter saw Susan's hand signal and understood the situation was deteriorating. He needed to buy time. Ambassador, he said smoothly, surely the Council's own laws require a full investigation before any action can be taken. After all, we entered your space by accident and have cooperated fully since then. A new voice joined the discussion. The tall, ethereal being composed of shifting geometric patterns rose from the highest tier. "The ambassador's concerns have merit," it said in a musical tone. "But so do the humans' rights under council law. I propose a compromise. Let them demonstrate their drive's safety through controlled tests." Susan's danger sense was screaming now. The power signatures from the council ships were spiking, and she noticed security forces quietly entering the chamber through secondary doors. She transmitted another coded message to the Stargazer. Amy, who had been quiet during the political exchange, suddenly spoke up. "We would be happy to demonstrate our drive's safety. In fact," she glanced at her tablet, then smiled, "we can prove it right now." Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. A technician burst into the chamber. "High Council, the human ship, it's gone." "Gone?" Krizak roared. "Gone where?" Another alarm joined the first, then another. On the massive display screens around the chamber, dots of light began appearing at different points in council space. The Stargazer was jumping from sector to sector, passing through quantum barriers like they weren't even there. "Impossible," the golden cloud being whispered. "They're navigating the quantum framework without access codes, without proper protocols." Susan allowed herself a small smile. The council members who had been so secretive earlier were now in a state of panic. Whatever they had been planning, the Stargazer's demonstration had disrupted it completely. Carter stepped forward again. "As you can see, our technology is both stable and controlled. Captain Martinez is simply demonstrating the drive's precision and safety." He didn't mention that the demonstration also proved humans could escape any attempt at containment. Vexterra's crystalline form was pulsing rapidly now. "Fascinating," it said. "Your approach to quantum mechanics, it's completely different from anything in our records. You've achieved what the Founders thought impossible." "The Founders," Susan said suddenly, speaking up for the first time. All eyes turned to her. "You keep mentioning them. But in all our time here, no one has explained who they were, or more importantly, where they went." The silence that followed was deafening. Susan noticed the secret exchange of data crystals had stopped completely. She had struck a nerve. Finally, the geometric pattern being spoke again. Perhaps we have been too hasty in our judgment. The humans have indeed demonstrated both capability and restraint. I move that we continue these discussions in a more collaborative manner." The Stargazer chose that moment to reappear in its original position near the station. Captain Martinez's voice came through the chamber's communication system. "Sorry for the unscheduled test, council members. Just wanted to clear up any concerns about our drive stability." Carter caught Amy's eye and nodded slightly. The demonstration had shifted the balance of power. The council couldn't simply dismiss humans as primitive anymore, nor could they risk open hostility. But as Susan watched the continuing secret exchanges among certain council members, she knew this was just the beginning. The humans had unknowingly stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple technological difference. The repeated mentions of the Founders, the panic over humans developing quantum technology independently, the secret communications. There was a mystery here, buried in the Council's past, and humanity's arrival had just forced it to the surface. Commander Nicholas Wells stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force ship Horizon, watching the emergency transmission from one of Earth's outer colonies. The holographic display showed scenes of destruction as Zarkak's warships appeared out of quantum space, their weapons already firing. "Colony Shield Station Beta is down," a panicked voice reported. "They came out of nowhere. We need immediate assistance." Wells turned to his crew, his face set with determination. "Battle stations. All hands prepare for quantum displacement. Engineering. Ready the new reality anchors." The Horizon was humanity's first dedicated warship equipped with the quantum displacement drive. What the Zarkaks didn't know was that Earth had been busy in the month since the Stargazer's encounter with the Council. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, 5 Zarkaks dreadnoughts detected at the colony. They're using standard Council quantum protocols. Wells allowed himself a small smile. Perfect. They still think we only have one ship with the drive. Deploy the fleet. Around the horizon, space rippled as 30 Earth ships phased into view. They had been there all along, hidden in a slightly different quantum state. The Zarkax had just walked into a trap. At the colony, Ambassador Krizak stood on his flagship's bridge, watching his forces overwhelm the human defenses. See how weak they are, he told his officers. Their quantum technology is unstable, dangerous. We do the galaxy a favor by. Sir, his sensor officer interrupted. Multiple quantum signatures. They're everywhere. The Earth fleet appeared simultaneously, surrounding the Zarkax ships. Wells's voice came through on all channels. This is Commander Nicholas Wells of the Earth Defense Force. You are engaging in unprovoked hostilities against a human colony. Stand down immediately. Instead of responding, the Zarkax ships opened fire. Their energy weapons were powerful enough to shatter planets. But the human ships simply phased through the attacks, the beams passing harmlessly through their quantum-shifted hulls. They cannot maintain that state forever. Krizak shouted. Continue firing. Sir, Wells's tactical officer reported, the Zarkax are following standard Council combat protocols, exactly as intelligence predicted. Wells nodded. Execute Operation Reality Check. The Earth ships began to move in ways that should have been impossible. They phased through the Zarkax shields as if they weren't there, appearing inside their defensive perimeters. The reality anchors activated, forcing small sections of space back into normal physics. The effect was devastating. The Zarkax found their advanced weapons useless against ships that could simply step sideways out of reality when threatened. Meanwhile, precisely targeted sections of their own ships were forced back into normal space, leaving them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Impossible. Krizak raged as his flagship's systems reported critical damage. Their technology is crude, primitive. They cannot. His words were cut off as his ship's bridge was forced back into normal space, a human vessel hovering impossibly close to his command center. This is your final warning. Wells's voice came through clearly now. Stand down, or we will be forced to demonstrate exactly how crude our technology is. Throughout the battle, Dr. Amy Green watched from her new laboratory on Earth. The quantum sensors she had developed were tracking everything, gathering data about how the Council ships navigated through quantum space. Look at this, she told Lieutenant Susan Morris, who had been assigned as her security liaison. The Zarkax ships all followed the same quantum paths. It's like they're driving on predetermined roads. Susan studied the data. While our ships move freely through quantum space, Amy finished. We're not bound by their rules because we never learned them. Our drive lets us go anywhere. A new alert caught their attention. The sensors were detecting massive quantum disturbances from other parts of Council space. The Zarkax weren't just attacking one colony. Back at the battle, Wells received the same information. Multiple Zarkax fleets detected, his communications officer reported. They're attacking all known human settlements in Council space. Known settlements, Wells repeated with a grim smile. Execute Phase 2. Across Council space, human colonies that the Zarkax had never detected began powering up their defenses. Earth had been using their quantum drive technology for years, establishing settlements and systems that the Council thought were unreachable. The Zarkax found themselves caught between visible human colonies and hidden ones, their forces split and vulnerable. Wells's fleet moved with precision, disabling ships without destroying them when possible. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting Council observation ships at the edge of the system. Non-Zarkax vessels. Good, Wells replied. Let them watch. They need to understand that we've been holding back during all our previous demonstrations. On her flagship, High Researcher Vexterra watched the battle with growing concern. The humans weren't just winning. They were rewriting everything the Council thought they knew about quantum mechanics. The Founders' laws, she whispered. They're breaking all of them, and reality itself isn't objecting. How is this possible? The answer came from an unexpected source. The golden cloud being who had spoken at the council meeting appeared on her ship's bridge, its form flickering with agitation. They found another way, it said simply. The Founders built roads through quantum space, carefully constructed paths that they claimed were the only safe ways to navigate reality. But the humans, they learned to walk without roads. In her laboratory, Amy was reaching the same conclusion. Look at these readings, she told Susan. The Council's quantum framework isn't natural. It's artificial, like a massive set of training wheels added to reality itself. Susan's eyes widened as she understood the implications. And we developed our technology without those training wheels. We learned to balance on our own. The battle was ending now. The Zarkak ships were disabled or retreating. Their supposedly superior technology proved useless against humans' more flexible approach. But Wells knew this was just the beginning. Status report, he ordered. All Zarkak's forces in retreat, sir. Minimal damage to our ships. The colony's defenses are already repairing themselves. Wells nodded, but his mind was on the bigger picture. The Council couldn't ignore this. Their carefully maintained system of quantum control had just been proven not only unnecessary but potentially limiting. As if confirming his thoughts, a priority message came through from Earth Command. The Council was calling an emergency session, not to punish humanity, but to understand them. In her lab, Amy was already preparing new presentations, new ways to explain human quantum theory. But Susan's intelligence training made her more cautious. The Founders built these limitations into reality for a reason, she said quietly. The question is, what were they afraid of? The answer to that question would change everything. But for now, humanity had proved itself more than capable of defending its interests, even against species that had been traveling quantum space for millennia. The war had begun, but it wasn't just a war of ships and weapons. It was a war of ideas, of different ways of understanding reality itself. And humanity had just shown that sometimes the simplest approach was the most powerful one of all. Dr. Linda Patterson stared at the readings on her screen with growing concern. The quantum disturbances were getting worse. After the failed Zarkak's attack on human colonies, their scientists had tried to copy Earth's quantum displacement technology. The results were catastrophic. Captain William Hayes, she called out to the commander of the rescue mission. I'm detecting another reality breach forming in Sector 7. The bridge of the Earth ship Quantum Shield hummed with activity as Hayes studied the tactical display. 3 Zarkak's research stations had already torn themselves apart trying to replicate human technology. Now the failed experiments were creating dangerous rifts in space-time. How long until the rift becomes critical? Hayes asked. His voice steadied despite the situation's gravity. Linda checked her instruments. 20 minutes, maybe less. Their attempts to force quantum displacement without understanding the basic principles are making things worse. They're trying to build a road without knowing how to lay the foundation. Around them, the quantum shield's specialized equipment worked to contain the spreading damage to reality itself. The ship had been designed specifically for this kind of crisis, equipped with modified versions of the reality anchors that had proved so effective in battle. Another rift detected, called out the sensor officer. This one's bigger than the others. Through the main viewport, they could see it, a tear in the fabric of space-time itself. It looked like a wound in reality, edges crackling with impossible energies and colors that hurt to look at. The Zarkak station that had created it was already breaking apart, its crew evacuating in panic. Begin rescue operations, Hayes ordered. Get those people out of there, regardless of species. Dr. Patterson, prepare the containment field. Linda nodded, her fingers flying over the controls. The human reality anchors had been modified to create stable zones around the rifts, preventing them from spreading. But each rift was different, requiring careful adjustments. Sir, The communications officer called out, "We're receiving a priority message from High Researcher Vexterra. The Council is requesting immediate assistance. Similar rifts are appearing in their core systems." Hayes turned to Linda. "Doctor, can we handle more than this sector?" Linda was already reviewing the data from Council space. What she saw made her blood run cold. "Captain, these aren't isolated incidents anymore. The rifts are starting to resonate with each other. If we don't stop this soon, they could begin a cascade effect." Meaning? Meaning the careful structure the Founders built into quantum space could start to unravel. The Council's entire framework for controlling reality could collapse. On the main screen, they could see Council ships arriving, led by Vexterra's distinctive crystalline vessel. The High Researcher's voice came through clearly. "Captain Hayes, Dr. Patterson, we need your help. Our conventional methods cannot contain these rifts." Hayes looked at Linda, who nodded. "We'll help," he told Vexterra, "but you need to understand what caused this. The Zarkax tried to copy our technology without understanding it. They assumed they could force it to work within the Founders' framework." "Yes," Vexterra's voice held a note of shame. "We are beginning to realize that perhaps the Founders' way is not the only way. But now we must focus on survival. The rifts are spreading faster than predicted." Linda brought up a new set of readings. "The Founders' quantum framework actually makes things worse. It's too rigid, too structured. When it breaks catastrophically." She paused, an idea forming. "But maybe we can use that." "Explain," Hayes and Vexterra said simultaneously. "The framework is like a crystal lattice," Linda said, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. "Break it wrong, and it shatters. But if we could introduce the right kind of flexibility." She looked up at Hayes. "Captain, I need to try something dangerous." Hayes studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Do it." Linda began reprogramming the reality anchors, incorporating ideas she'd been working on since the war began. "Instead of trying to force reality back into its normal state, we're going to let it flex, like a shock absorber." The quantum shield moved closer to the largest rift. Around them, Council ships watched in a mixture of fear and fascination as Linda activated her modified anchors. The ship's quantum field expanded, but instead of fighting against the rift's chaos, it began to move with it. "Remarkable," Vexterra observed. "You're not trying to enforce order on quantum space. You're adapting to its natural state." "The Founders got it backward," Linda explained as she worked. "They thought reality needed to be controlled, confined to specific paths and patterns, but quantum space naturally wants to flow, to shift and change. Fighting against that just makes things worse." The rift began to stabilize, its wild energies gradually calming as Linda's modified field gave them room to dissipate naturally. It was like watching a river find its natural course instead of trying to force it into artificial channels. "Send these modifications to all ships with reality anchors," Hayes ordered. "Priority transmission to both Earth and Council forces." He turned to Vexterra's image on the screen. "We'll need to work together to contain all the rifts." For the next several hours, human and Council ships worked side by side, using Linda's new approach to stabilize the tiers in reality. The Zarkax, seeing the effectiveness of the joint operation, finally stood down their remaining research efforts. In her laboratory on the quantum shield, Linda continued to study the data they were gathering. Each stabilized rift taught them more about how quantum space really worked, without the artificial limitations the Founders had imposed. Dr. Patterson, Vexterra had come aboard to see her work firsthand, its crystalline form reflecting the shifting energies of nearby quantum fields. "We have been blind. For millennia, we thought the Founders' framework was reality itself. We never questioned, never looked beyond it." Linda nodded, understanding the impact of this revelation on Council civilization. "Sometimes the hardest chains to break are the ones we don't know we're wearing. But now we face a new question," Vexterra continued. "If the Founders were wrong about the need to control quantum space, what else were they wrong about?" Before Linda could respond, Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. New readings were coming in from deep space, from regions that even Earth ships hadn't reached yet. Something was happening out there, something that made both the rifts and the Founders' framework look tiny by comparison. The reality war wasn't over. In fact, Linda realized as she studied the new data, it might have only been the beginning. The real question wasn't what the Founders had been wrong about, but what they had been afraid of. The emergency meeting chamber of the Council Station was packed with representatives from every major species. Dr. Amy Green stood at the center alongside High Researcher Vexterra, both of them studying the three-dimensional display of deep space readings. "The signals are getting stronger," Amy said, pointing to the swirling patterns of quantum energy. "Whatever's out there, it's moving through quantum space in ways we've never seen before." The chamber had changed since her first appearance here. Where once there had been fear and hostility toward human technology, now there was a sense of urgent cooperation. The quantum rifts caused by the Zarkax had taught everyone a harsh lesson about the dangers of arrogance. Even Ambassador Krizak, watching from his seat with newly humbled eyes, had to admit that humanity's different approach to quantum physics had saved them all. The modified reality anchors developed by Dr. Linda Patterson were now standard equipment on both human and council ships. "The patterns are familiar," Vexterra said, its crystalline form pulsing with thought. "They remind me of something in the oldest council records, from the time of the Founders themselves." Lieutenant Susan Morris, who had been quietly observing from the side, stepped forward. "I think it's time we addressed the real question," she said. "Who were the Founders, and what were they running from?" The chamber fell silent. Susan had finally voiced what many had begun to suspect. The Founders' rigid framework of quantum control hadn't been about safety or proper procedure. It had been about hiding. "The ancient records are incomplete," said the Golden Cloud being who had become a regular ally to the humans. "But they speak of a time before the framework, when quantum space was wild and free. The Founders came from deep space, bringing their technology and their warnings." "Warnings about what?" Commander Nicholas Wells asked from his position near the main doors. The Horizon's captain had been called to the station along with other key human personnel. Before anyone could answer, new alarms began to sound. The deep space sensors were showing massive disturbances in quantum space, far beyond anything they'd seen before. "Multiple contacts," reported a council technician. They're moving through quantum space without using the framework at all. But the energy readings are off the charts." Amy studied the readings, her eyes widening. "These aren't rifts or accidents. This is natural quantum travel, but on a scale we've never seen. Whatever's out there, they're masters of quantum space in its pure form." "The precursors," Vexterra whispered. Everyone turned to look at the High Researcher. "There are myths, stories we dismissed as legends, about beings who lived in quantum space itself. The Founders were running from them." Captain William Hayes, fresh from his rescue missions containing the rifts, spoke up. "So the framework wasn't about controlling quantum space. It was about hiding in it, making everything so rigid and structured that these precursors wouldn't notice you." "Like building a box to hide in," Amy agreed. "But now, the Zarkax experiments have attracted their attention. The box is broken." As if to confirm her words, the main display lit up with new contacts. Vast shapes were emerging from quantum space, their forms shifting and changing in ways that defied normal physics. They moved with a grace that made even human quantum ships look clumsy. "They're heading for council space," Wells reported, studying the tactical displays. "ETA 6 hours at current speed." The chamber erupted in panic, but Amy's voice cut through the chaos. "Wait, look at their movement patterns." She manipulated the display, highlighting the quantum wake of the approaching entities. "They're not attacking. These movements, they're curious. Investigating." "Indeed," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Dr. Linda Patterson entering the chamber, her face tired but excited. "I've been analyzing the deep space readings. The precursors aren't hostile. They're the original quantum space explorers. The founders didn't understand them, so they hid and built walls. Susan nodded, pieces falling into place. And now humans have accidentally shown them that someone else is learning to walk the quantum paths naturally. We're doing it differently than they do, but we're not hiding behind artificial frameworks. We have to make a choice, Amy said, looking around the chamber. Do we try to hide again, or do we face this new reality and learn from it? Vexterra floated forward. The Council has hidden long enough. The Founder's Way brought us far, but perhaps it's time for new paths. The crystalline being turned to Amy. Will humanity help us face this challenge? Amy looked at her fellow humans. Susan with her keen intelligence, Wells with his tactical wisdom, Hayes with his courage, and Linda with her brilliant innovations. Then she looked at the council members who had become allies. Vexterra, the golden cloud being, and even Krizak, who now watched with anticipation rather than hostility. We'll do better than that, she said. We'll build bridges. The founders tried to control quantum space. We learned to work with it. Maybe together, we can learn to truly understand it. The vast shapes drew closer, their movement through quantum space like a dance of impossible geometry. But now, instead of fear, there was a growing sense of anticipation in the chamber. Humanity had shown that there were many ways to approach the mysteries of reality. Perhaps it was time for both humans and the Council to learn some new ones. Linda stepped up to the main control panel, her fingers moving with practiced ease. I'm modifying our quantum fields to match their frequency. Not hiding, not challenging, just opening a door. Send the signal to all ships, Wells ordered. Human and Council vessels alike. We face this together. As the precursors approached, Amy couldn't help but smile. What had started as an accidental breach of Council space had led to this moment. Not a war, not a struggle for dominance, but a chance to learn something entirely new about the nature of reality itself. Ready all communication systems, she said. Let's show them that not everyone needs to hide in boxes. Sometimes the best way forward is to simply open the door and say hello. The chamber watched in awe as the first of the precursor entities entered normal space. Its form was beautiful in ways that defied description, moving through quantum states as naturally as humans walk through air. And as their first messages began to arrive, translated through both human and Council systems, one thing became clear. The war beyond reality had never really been about conflict at all. It had been about breaking free from artificial limitations, about learning to see the universe in new ways. And now, thanks to humanity's stumbling entrance onto the galactic stage, everyone was about to learn just how vast and wonderful reality could truly be. In the end, it wasn't human weapons or Council technology that had changed the galaxy. It was the simple human trait of looking at problems with fresh eyes, of not being bound by the way things have always been done. And as the precursors began to share their knowledge of quantum space in its purest form, that human trait would help forge a new understanding between all species, from the youngest human colonies to the oldest beings in the galaxy. The story of humanity's shock to Council species had become something far greater, the beginning of a new chapter in the history of all intelligent life, written across the quantum fabric of reality itself.